Hi everyone, it's Shannon here. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am joining Honeybee Stamp's Spring Bliss Video Hop. This hop is celebrating Honeybee's recent release, and today I'm going to be creating this bold and vibrant card with the new Lovely Layers Easter Lily Honeycuts die set. This is the die set I'm using today. This gorgeous die set is a layering set. Up at the top we have the 3 dies that create that large flower. Then you have those 2 pieces that create the stamen. Then underneath that we have a row here with 3 dies that create 3 layers for a second flower, then 2 kind of fern-like leaves, and then 2 other leaves. So lots of dies in this die set. I'm going to actually just use the layers for the large flower, the 2 layers for the stamen, and then 2 of the leaves. And I went ahead and die cut 3 of each of those. So I have 3 sets of all of those leaves and flower layers. I'm going to start with the base layer, so the largest layer, and I'm going to ink blend these flowers in 3 different kind of shades. Starting with picked raspberry for the base here, I'm going to ink blend a little gradation, and I'm not worried about covering the whole flower because only 2 petals really show up. After I've ink blended that base with picked raspberry, I'm doing a little Seedless Preserves, and then going back with my picked raspberry, just kind of smooth out that gradation. This back layer is going to be my darkest layer, and then I'm going to progressively get a little bit lighter through my 3 layers. So now we're on layer 2. I'm going to again start with picked raspberry. Most of this layer will actually show, all the 3 top petals will show on this layer. Again, I'm doing a little gradation here with that picked raspberry just to get a nice smooth transition here. Once I finish with picked raspberry, I'm going to go back to that Seedless Preserves and just do a little bit at the center of the flower. Now that bottom petal here, or it's actually the petal to the right, will be covered up with the last layer, so I don't have to worry about getting that a little heavy-handed with the Seedless Preserves. So here for the last layer, I'm going to again start with picked raspberry, create a gradation, and then finish with a tiny bit of Seedless Preserves just to make it kind of blend in with the rest of the flower. So here are all my 3 layers. I'm going to put it together so you can see on top of the base layer we have that second largest layer, and then we finish with that tiny little petal, and this just creates a beautiful flower. Look how pretty that looks, and we're going to add more to it with the stamen and then some little bit of Copic coloring as well. So I'm going to move on to my next flower here. This is a red flower, so I'm starting with barn door. Again, started with the base, so the largest layer, ink blended that barn door, a little bit of a gradation, and now I'm going to move to Seedless Preserves to create kind of more contrast or more of a gradation here, a more vibrant gradation. Finish with a little bit more barn door to kind of smooth it out. Now moving on to my second layer. Again, starting with the barn door, creating that gradation over those petals. I want it to be a little bit more heavy-handed with that barn door at the center of the flower, so I am being more heavy-handed with the ink blending there. And then I'll finish with a little bit of that Seedless Preserves, not quite as much as I did on that base layer, because again, I want contrast between these layers. I want that base layer to be the darkest. Now finishing up with this tiny little petal here, a little bit more barn door, and a tiny bit of Seedless Preserves. And here you can see all the layers stacked up on top of each other. Now for our last flower, I'm going to do basically a yellow-orange kind of combo, starting with mustard seed, basically ink blended the whole thing with that. Then I'm moving on to ripe persimmon and really kind of creating a gradation here. I want it to be kind of go from that orange to the yellow, and then I'll finish with a tiny bit, well actually kind of a fair amount of barn door just to really kind of deepen it up a little bit so we have a little bit more contrast between the orange and the center. So I'm finishing up just doing a little bit of blending with mustard seed to kind of smooth it out. And now I'm going to move on to my second layer, again starting with mustard seed, ink blending basically all the petals in this yellow. Then I'll move back to my ripe persimmon, kind of give it a turn here because it's just easier for me to ink blend starting from the right side. And again, creating a little gradation here. So it's a beautiful transition between that yellow and the orange. And then we'll finish up with a tiny bit of that barn door just to kind of really deepen the center. So we're basically done with this second layer, just finishing up with a little bit more mustard seed, just kind of smooth it all out. And then my very last layer here for this flower, again starting with mustard seed, then a little bit of that ripe persimmon, creating that little gradation. And then once we finish that, we'll grab a little bit of that barn door and add a tiny bit to the very tip top. That just helps blend this petal into the rest of the flower. And here's that flower all stacked up and ready to go. Now we're going to move on to the stamen. So I'm going to do all the large part of the stamen here with twisted citron. I'm going to do a little kind of ombre or a little gradation here, kind of having it a little bit darker at the base. And once I finish that, I'm going to do 2 colors for the top piece. One of them I'm going to do completely in ripe persimmon, and the 2 remaining top pieces I'm going to do in barn door. I just thought this was when I construct these flowers, it's nice to have a little bit more contrast, especially with that red flower. I have to have that stamen be orange instead of red, otherwise it'll just all blend in. So here you can see them stacked up together. Now I'm going to move on to these leaves. Pretty simple here. I started with 3 colors, but I actually only used 2. Starting first with twisted citron, and after I ink blend kind of the top of the leaves with that twisted citron, I then am going to move on to a darker shade, which is pine needles, and just ink blend kind of the base of the leaves. Again, kind of creating a little gradation over these leaves. This just is a really pretty, just adds a lot to the look of these leaves by using these 2 colors together. So those are my completed leaves, and I'm just going to repeat that process for my remaining 4 leaves. So here's everything all ink blended and kind of stacked up so you can see. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to add some Copic details to this flower. I'm just going to do it to this one flower here. If you've ever looked at lilies, sometimes they have, like, I think it's actually from the stamen, like pollen on the petals, or it might just be marking on the petals. I don't know. But I'm going to basically mimic that here on this flower. Just adds a little bit more interest. I think it's really pretty. So I'm just going to take a marker and just kind of add dots. Basically divide the petal in half and add dots on one half, and then dots kind of radiating out from the center on the other half. So really, really simple to do. And once I finish that, I'm going to actually glue the layers together so you get to see this flower finally come together. This is the exciting part. I'm going to be using, or I am using, Honeybee's Precision Glue, and then just add a little bit of liquid glue to the backside of all the layers, stick them down, including the stamen, finishing with that very top piece for the stamen. And you'll see here, and for this flower I'm actually using the barn door ink blended top, but you can see here how beautiful that looks when it's all done. Oh, I love all these really bright colors. Kind of went a totally different direction than real Easter lilies, but I just really wanted to do something very colorful. So I've finished all my flowers. Now I'm ready to move on to my sentiment. So I have a sentiment here from the Spring Joy Bouquet stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp it onto this scrap of black cardstock. I am going to heat emboss it, so I did apply some anti-static powder, then inked up my sentiment in Versamark ink. Now I'm just going to dip it into some white embossing powder, and then of course heat set this with my heat tool. Now this stamp set has matching die, so I will also die cut it out with the matching die, and here you can see that beautiful sentiment ready to go. So first thing we're going to do is kind of tape down our black card base just so it doesn't kind of pop open while I arrange all these flowers. So I'm just going to arrange all them onto this black A2 top folding card base. Once I get everything kind of arranged the way I want, I'll just double check that I've got a good space there for my sentiment to go, and then I'm going to grab a piece of press and seal and press it over the top of all the flowers and the leaves to make sure they stay in place, and then I'll turn my my whole card base over so I have the back side of all my die cuts exposed, and then I can start adding some foam adhesive to the back side to kind of course give this some dimension, but also kind of hold all those leaves kind of in place and flowers kind of in place together. So I've removed the backing on the flowers, and now I'm going to just stick them to the front of my card base. Once I kind of get them stuck down, I'm kind of going to rearrange a little bit here on that yellow orange flower and some of those leaves, and once I get it stuck down, then I'll remove that press and seal, and then all I have left to do is add my sentiment. Now I also want to pop that up, so I did add a layer of foam adhesive. I'm going to remove the backing and then stick a little bit more, so a second layer of foam adhesive to the left side of that sentiment, so it can kind of go over the flowers a little bit, especially that little bit of the pink flower on the right side. And then I noticed I needed a little bit some more support, so I cut a tiny bit more and just tucked it under the U. And here is the finished card. And I'll hold it up to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details in this card. I really love this layering die set. It was so fun and easy to ink blend these lilies in different colors, and I'm just so happy with how bold and vibrant they are. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. And if you liked this video, I'd so appreciate it if you consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.